Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Hello again, everyone, and thanks for joining us here at KAKM for Monday's edition of Alaska Weather. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and I'll be hosting tonight's show. Up first here, we've got on tonight's hazardous weather map here, we've got red shaded areas along the Alaska Range, that for extreme fire danger. Warnings out for the Alaska Range there through the passes where winds gusting to 45 miles per hour, relative humidities down to 25%, 26%. That's for tonight until about 2 a.m. tomorrow morning, and then conditions will gradually improve, but extreme fire danger all through that area. And in the case of the Copper River Basin, the same thing, a warning for extreme fire danger. Temperatures in the mid-80s today, southerly winds gusting to 30 miles an hour with relative humidities down in that 25 to 30% range there. So any fires that get going will spread quite rapidly in this, and so burning isn't recommended. And the yellow shaded areas here are dense smoke advisories out for the central interior, the northern Koyukuk Valley, the Kobuk Valley, and then the lower Koyukuk and Yukon Valley areas out across the Seward Peninsula, and also for the Noatak Valley and the northwest coast. All those areas have advisories for dense smoke, and that creating some IFR at times today. Both Selawik and Kotzebue this afternoon down to a half mile in smoke, and up there at Noatak 3/4 of a mile. So those out through tonight, and then possibly tomorrow conditions improving a little bit better, but the lowest conditions appear to be back here to the northwest with a kind of an easterly wind here coming through the mid-Tanana Valley and pushing that smoke back to the northwest there. On the fire danger map for today, you can see quite an area of extreme fire danger here over the central interior areas, from the central interior up across the western upper Yukon Valley, across the Koyukuk Valley, and then back here from the Kobuk up into the Noatak Valley area, extreme fire danger. Also extreme here in areas of the Copper River Basin, and also for the Matanuska Valley, Eagle River Valley, down into the Anchorage area, pretty extreme fire conditions. Of course, those winds gusting up to 35 miles an hour at Anchorage International Airport this afternoon. And moving on to the satellite imagery yesterday, had a sunny day here along the southeast coast with temperatures rising into the 70s to lower 80s, much like today. The interior, we had a front that brought rain in across southern Alaska on Saturday. That had moved north and was really dissipating throughout the day in the just kind of doing a gentle dissolve up here over the north central interior. Then we had a pretty good storm with gale force winds here along the Alaska Peninsula and the southeast Bering Sea. All had gale warnings out yesterday, and the low center there near the Fox Islands, and that spread rain heavy at times up to Kodiak Island back along the Alaska Peninsula. And today you can see a pretty good band of clouds here from Kodiak shifting northeastward, and rainfall amounts are on the heavy side, anywhere from in the southwest interior, Kalskag having about a half an inch of rain. Togiak down here on the coast picked up 2/3 of an inch of rain. And Kodiak at the state airport, they had 1.25 inches of rain. Those are all 24-hour amounts in at 4 o'clock this afternoon. And even heavier amounts recorded down on the southern portion of Kodiak Island there. Another wet day along the Alaska Peninsula, but winds not nearly as strong as yesterday. A lot of clouds and some moisture there over the eastern Aleutian areas, but up in the interior, different story. Sunny and hot conditions up there. Again, the areas of smoke right through here. Also some bands of mid and high level cirrus moving through, but pretty good conditions. Sunny, warm conditions all the way down across the Copper River Basin and then along the entire stretch of the Panhandle there. Today, high pressure off the coast there, keeping the clouds close to the coast, but not quite inland at all. Just some sunshine back across the Copper River Basin areas, and then up into the northwest interior where you got the heavier smoke conditions. and this front pushing right up to near Kodiak Island earlier today with a band of rain back to the northwest, all the way to the Seward Peninsula, St. Lawrence Island area. And then more showery conditions here back to the west. A fair amount of showers moving onto the southwest coast, and they kind of break up, and then another batch here with that trough swinging across just west of the Pribilofs down across the eastern Aleutians, and then breezy conditions, a lot of clouds and showers out over the western and central Aleutians. For tonight, that front advances northeastward here, so rain spreading over south central Alaska, the Kenai Peninsula, into Prince William Sound on the North Gulf Coast, at least as far east as about Cordova. It looks like just clouds over at Yakutat. No change for the Panhandle, just mostly clear skies, light wind conditions, except a little gusty along the south coast. There are still small craft advisories out in that area. Areas of smoke here over the central and northwest interior, back again where the advisories are for the Noatak Valley down to the Seward Peninsula. And then again, rain or pretty numerous showers occurring along this front here, back as it moves northward across the western interior, but those showers scattering out and becoming more isolated here, but still fair chance of mostly cloudy skies with scattered showers along the southwest coast, and that trough will keep it showery over the Alaska Peninsula, as well as the Pribilof Islands, kind of a broad area of west-southwesterly wind flow, mostly southwest here, without really any big area high pressure building in. We'll keep it a little unsettled out here for the next couple of days. The low center way back there to the west, 982 millibars. That's where the strongest winds will be, back over the southwest Bering Sea and the western Aleutian areas. For tomorrow, that low is still parked out there. Southwest winds, south to southwest winds, keeping the showers in across the southwest coast with mostly cloudy skies. South central Alaska, rain changing to showers tomorrow. And that front washing out here is a chance of some thunderstorm activity developing from the Kobuk, Koyukuk Valley areas down into the eastern Alaska Range. And also a pretty good chance of some thunderstorm activity up here along the Brooks Range down into the upper Yukon Valley there, with the heaviest precipitation occurring back here to the west and northwest, especially as it gets up there onto the southern slopes of the Brooks Range area. So it looks like a pretty wet day from the Koyukuk Valley westward all the way out to Kotzebue Sound, and more of a scattered shower, so some partial clearing back in behind across the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta and the valley there. Look for increasing clouds here along the southeast coast, but another dry day there, at least in part. Most of this moisture here staying to the west, and then that'll gradually push eastward tomorrow night, and that remnants of that front as a trough here should push a band of clouds and some showers through the central part of the Panhandle, probably staying dry with still maybe some clearing there over the southern areas, and then drying out here along the North Gulf Coast. Mostly cloudy, partly to mostly cloudy with isolated showers now over south central Alaska, over the Talkeetnas and mostly the Chugach, possibly the central Kenai Peninsula. Could see some afternoon showers developing, but again, pretty isolated, especially compared to what will be in this area tomorrow. And then some scattered thunderstorms developing over the eastern interior, the upper Tanana Valley 40-mile country, possibly down to the eastern Brooks Range or even northeastern Copper River Basin. Another area of thunderstorm activity back here from the upper Yukon Valley back toward the northern Koyukuk Valley and the southern Brooks Range there, the central areas. But clearing out along the central and eastern Arctic coastal areas, a little bit cooler on the temperatures up there. Some scattered showers on the west side. Partly to mostly sunny here in the west, but scattered showers possible here over the Kuskokwim Delta into Bristol Bay. Even the Kuskokwim Valley has a chance of some showers going, and kind of showery conditions continuing. That low still back out there over the western Bering Sea, and another trough may pick those showers up and increase the winds a little bit here for the Pribilof Islands, and eventually into the eastern Aleutians as that swings through late Wednesday afternoon and into the evening. Temperatures this afternoon quite varied here along the southeast coast, from 67 at Sitka to 87 at Annette Island this afternoon. Juneau up to 81, 64 at Yakutat, and along the North Gulf Coast generally in the mid-60s today, but Valdez was up to 70, 60s, 65 in Kenai. That's at 4 p.m. They were up to 70 earlier today. And upper 70s, 79 in Anchorage today, but it's cooled down to the lower 70s currently. 77 in Talkeetna, 84 at Gulkana there with those south winds gusting to 25 miles an hour. And up in the Tanana Valley, that's where it was the hottest today, 87 at Fairbanks. And Nenana was a warm spot in the state today with 91 degrees. Otherwise, it was 82 over at Northway, 84 at Fort Yukon, 85 at Eagle. Same thing there at Bettles in the Koyukuk Valley. Back to the west, lower 80s here at Indian Mountain and up at Ambler, 77 degrees at Anatuvik. Up along the Arctic coast, Nuiqsut had 76, Wainwright 75 for two of the warmer locations up in that area. 58 at Barrow, but 10 degrees warmer at Point Lay. Lower 70s here, Kivalina at 72. Kotzebue had 74 today, 70 at Golovin, 10 degrees cooler over at Nome, 68 at Unalakleet, and 83 in McGrath, but much cooler there where the clouds increased here, and of course the rain with 64 at Bethel. And then lower to mid 50s here along the southwest coast, upper 50s to near 60 in Bristol Bay there with the clouds and rain in that area. Lower 50s here along the Alaska Peninsula, near 50 out over the Aleutians and the Pribilofs. Lows for tonight, quite mild up here over the northwest, 55 to 60 for the lows. And about the same actually here through the central interior as well, with mostly in the 50s here over southern Alaska, lower 50s over the Panhandle, and mid to upper 40s here for the Aleutians and the Bering Sea. Highs tomorrow, markedly cooler here over the interior, especially here in the west-northwest interior, where upper 60s will be the rule. Eastern interior, mid to upper 70s. Eagles could still push up to 78 degrees, but down a good 10 to 15 degrees here through the Copper River Basin. And looks like just lower to mid 60s here for south central Alaska. The southeast coast, though, still into the 70s with coastal locations in the 60s. And 50s out here over the Alaska Peninsula, still staying cool out over the Aleutians. For flying weather, a good area of IFR pushing up to the North Gulf Coast from the Gulf of Alaska. That'll spread over Prince William Sound and as far east as probably just west of Elfin Cove. Some marginal VFR possibly showing up there along the central panhandle. This map drawn for tomorrow afternoon. Marginal VFR times Kodiak Island. That's slipping up across Cook Inlet and especially the western Cook Inlet areas with marginal VFR as far north as the Alaska Range. But VFR through the interior. Marginal VFR due to smoke here up over the north central and northwest interior back across the Noatak Valley areas, but Cape Lisburne and Point Hope, IFR conditions there. Through the Bering Strait, looks pretty IFR as far as St. Lawrence Island goes, right along the southwest coast here, Nunivak Island, about as far south as the Pribilofs, otherwise looking pretty marginal for the Alaska Peninsula and the central and eastern Aleutian areas before you get back into the IFR farther out to the west. Anatuvik, chance of a thunderstorm, VFR conditions, moisture increasing from south to north. Look for it to become marginal in the afternoon. That same forecast is for Adigan as well. Moisture coming up from the south throughout the day, so VFR becoming marginal in the afternoon, especially on the southern entrance with a chance of thunderstorms. Lake Clark and Merrill, marginal VFR, lowest conditions well, either side, marginal VFR in both entrances and through the pass. Same forecast for Rainy, marginal VFR there. Windy, marginal VFR at times. And for Isabel, marginal conditions as well. Chance of a thunderstorm both for Isabel and Mentasta. Tanita, VFR, otherwise marginal VFR possible here on the eastern entrance. And for Portage, again, IFR here on the east side, otherwise marginal. And for Chilkoot and White, looks like another day of VFR. Freezing levels showing as that front advances eastward, coming down to about 8,000 feet here right over northern Cook Inlet, and then back up to 12,000 feet here over the Yakutat area, and still up to about 14,000 feet over the southern southeast coast, and then a big area with that low pressure aloft sitting out in the Bering Sea there, cool air with 6,000 feet there, but still up to the north quite warm. And with that icing threats, with that mass of moisture moving northward there, mostly above the 8,000 to 10,000 foot level from the central interior here, then up to the Brooks Range and extending back to the west out across the northwest coast. And also for the North Gulf Coast, could see some light isolated moderate rime icing here. Again, about as far east as Elfin Cove, back across Yakutat and the North Gulf Coast to Prince William Sound, but generally icing free here over the southwest interior and Kodiak Island. And then a couple of more batches out here farther to the west. Winds aloft chart showing the jet stream today was more southeast to northwest here, just near Kodiak Island up across Bristol Bay. Tomorrow that shifts over to the east, allowing that front to swing through south central Alaska tonight and push up into the interior with the moisture and much cooler temperatures as the ridge kind of retreats back to the west now and opens up to southwest flow aloft. but at 9,000 feet, it's mostly south to north here, just 10 to 15 knots, some westerlies 20 to 25 knots through the central interior. Back around to the east, 25 to 30 knots up along the Arctic coast there. Southerlies at about 20 here along the west coast, stronger winds out over the southeast Bering Sea areas. And 3,000 feet southwest to northeast here, anywhere from 15 to 25 knots here over the eastern interior. Generally stronger northwest winds along the central and south coast, but lighter over the inside water areas. And then those winds pretty brisk out over the Bering Sea, but offshore there. Some of that catching the Pribilof Islands, southerlies at about 30 knots, but up to 40 knots, 30 to 40 knots over the western Aleutians from the west-southwest. And turbulence-wise, again, some mechanical chop possible, northern Lynn Canal, and then along the central and south coast of the Panhandle. Otherwise, pretty smooth here through much of mainland Alaska with those easterly winds. Could be a little bumpy there along the Arctic coast there to about Point Ley. And then some moderate chop, mostly out here over the central Bering Sea from St. Matthew Island down into and across, probably including Adak there. Atka, right on the edge of the moderate turbulence with some light to isolated moderate chop as far east as the Fox Islands, and that coming up and just catching the southwest coast of Nunivak Island. And after the break hangar flying, I'll be back with the marine forecasts.
Good evening. I'm Harry Keeling, and on behalf of the Alaska Public Media and the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation, welcome to Hangar Flying. Last time, if you were able to tune in, we had John Parrott on the program. John is the manager of Ted Stevens International Airport and was talking about a concern, that is the weed infestation on Lake Hood, to include the invasive species Alodia. And tonight, I want to talk about something a little bit different, and that is what's going on, what else is going around in the airport. So John, welcome back.
Thank you, sir.
You want to talk about the Lake Hood master plan?
Mm-hmm. We kicked the master plan off several years ago. The last Lake Hood master plan was, I think, completed back in about 2006. So we were a little bit overdue, but it didn't appear that a lot had changed in the general aviation arena. So we kicked the master plan off. We're working our way. We went through some public input to help us scope what should the master plan look at. And we always get a lot of good ideas, some of which are master plan infrastructure issues, and then some of which are operational policy and procedure issues. And so we're glad to get those. They end up just not being master plan issues, so we move them and we deal with them outside the master planning process, but it's still good information for us to get. We're currently finalizing with our consultant the forecast. It shows very modest predicted growth in the general aviation community. A lot of that will be in the corporate side. And then we'll start developing alternatives for how to accommodate that growth as needed at the Lake Hood Seaplane Base.
Okay. Recently, some coverage of the discussions of Point Woronzof and possible future land use. Mm-hmm. Can you touch on that?
Certainly. That deals more with the big airport, the Anchorage International side, than the Lake Hood side. But for several years, as part of a previous land trade in the 1990s, as part of the West Anchorage District Plan, which was a municipal effort that went through an extensive public process, that planning effort concluded that the city and the airport have some conflicts between ownership and use of a number of parcels of property, both on and around the airport. So the West Anchorage District Plan recommended that we, the city and the airport, get together to see if we can resolve those. So there was a land trade task force put together that met 10 times with community representatives, legislative representatives, various city departments and agencies, and the airport to look at were there ways we could resolve some of these conflicts. And the recommendation from that task force, which came out I think late last year, that recommendation was that yes, there were ways to exchange whole or partial parcels to resolve some of those conflicts. And the parcels that are really kind of the major ones were Point Woronzof Park, which by the way is not the parking lot at the north end, just north of the wastewater facility. That's Point Woronzof Overlook and is airport property and has been for many years and would be one of the pieces we might want to trade to the Muni. Then there's the Anchorage Wastewater Utility Plant. There's a large section to the south of that that is dedicated for their expansion. And then there's a section south of that that is actually the dedicated Point Warrenzoff Park. And I only explain that because a lot of people we talk to think that parking lot is the park, and that's not the area we're talking about. On the airport side, Little Campbell Lake is airport property. Very high value, very high volume, recreational use by the residents of Anchorage. Connors Bog Dog Park is airport property. The airport is really not in the business of running dog parks, and there's really little opportunity to do aviation development to the east of Jewel Lake, up next to the municipal snow dump, which is also on airport property and which the municipality needs to make some improvements to. And then, as many people remember, the airport received from the federal government the old FCC property. And there's a section south of Raspberry that butts up against Kincaid Park that we think might make a nice little addition to Kincaid Park. So those are kind of the parcels that we in the Muni are looking to try to sort our way through. And the first step that we think everyone has agreed we need to do is to get the Muni on a long-term lease for the snow dump or snow disposal site so that they can begin the process to make the EPA mandated improvements there. And we'll do that as long as we have a good faith effort to move forward on the rest of these parcels, because quite frankly, if we don't make any progress toward a land trade, the FAA has been very clear with us that we are not in compliance with the grant assurances, and we will have very little choice but to start charging for the recreational use of airport property. And that's not really a path we're terribly interested in going down.
John, thanks very much. That was a great explanation. Appreciate it. I know our audience will. I appreciate you being on the program tonight.
Certainly, Harry.
Ladies and gentlemen, I hope you enjoyed tonight's program. And I would ask you to keep in mind it's brought to you by the Alaskan Aviation Safety Foundation. We're completely member supported. If you are a member and you need to renew your 2015 dues, please do that. If you're not a member, you can go to our website and become a member, and it enables to bring you this program twice a week. We also have 2 safety seminars a year in Anchorage. We have 3 scholarships that we give, all made possible by you all being members and supporting our organization. Until next time, fly safe.
Welcome back. Well, small craft advisories here along the southern half of the outer coastline, with seas running 7 to 8 feet. Much lighter winds and more variable up here to the north. Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, southerlies 25 knots tomorrow afternoon. Northwesterlies 15 to 20 knots for the central and southern inside waters. And then for Wednesday, those all become westerly at about 10 to 15 knots here, all along the outer coastline, with seas running 5 to 6 feet. Still northwest 20 with 4-foot seas there for Clarence Strait. And southerly winds for Stevens Passage about 15 knots. Northern Lynn Canal, call it 20 knots with 4-foot seas. Prince William Sound tomorrow, southerlies at about 15 knots. Southwest here 10 to 15 for the North Gulf Coast, with seas running about 7 feet all the way back to the Barren Islands. 15 knots southwesterlies there for Kodiak Island, about the same in Shelikof Strait, and south to southwest here for Cook Inlet, but only at about 10 knots with 2 to 3 foot seas. No change for Cook Inlet on Wednesday. Light variable winds with 10 knots or less, seas 2 feet or less for Prince William Sound in the forecast. West 15 for the North Gulf Coast, and then here from the Barren Islands into the Western Gulf there, or along that coastline, southwesterlies only at 10 knots. South 15 here for Kodiak Island, both on the east side and Shelikof Strait, up into Kamishak Bay, seas running 3 to 5 feet. And for the Bering Sea side of the peninsula tomorrow, southerlies at 15 knots, southwest 15 on the Pacific side, seas of course higher here, 7 to 8 feet versus 3 to 4 feet. And for the outlook for Wednesday, southeast winds 10 knots there in the case of Bristol Bay, but on the peninsula here, southeast up to 20 knots, more of a southerly direction on the Pacific side, south 15 there from Sandpoint all the way up to Sitkinak. And then for the Aleutians, small craft advisories for the western and central Aleutians tomorrow here for west to southwest winds. 25 to 30 knots, more of a south to southwest wind at 25 here for the central Aleutians. The Fox Islands, south to southwest at about 20 knots with 6-foot seas. And then the outlook for Wednesday there, south to southwest, again 20 to 25 knots for the Fox Islands, and southwesterlies at about 25 knots here for the central Aleutians, becoming a little more westerly back out there to the west with seas running 8 to 9 feet in most areas. And for the southwest coast, tomorrow, southerly winds at 20 knots with 5 to 6 foot seas. Southeast 20 here for St. Lawrence Island. Small craft advisories for St. Matthew Island Marine Zone, the northern Bering Sea, southeasterlies up to 25 knots. Southerlies at about 20 to 22 knots there with 7 foot seas for the Pribilof Islands. And the outlook for Wednesday, not much change, except the seas come up to about 9 feet with those 20 knot winds over the Pribilof. Southeast winds 20 knots here along the southwest coast, seas 5 to 7 feet, and 25 knot winds with 10 foot seas for the northern Bering Sea. Up along the Arctic coast, we've got brisk wind advisories along the central and eastern stretch of the coastline there for 25 knot winds right out of the east. Easterlies up to 30 knots here on the west side, and from Wales up to Point Hope, say about 20 knots from the southwest, and then small craft advisories there from Cape Thompson to Cape Beaufort. And those drop back, southerlies at 20 knots there for Wednesday. Still got some pretty brisk east winds up here along the central and western Arctic coast at about 25 knots, taking a turn more northeasterly here on the east side there from Flaxman Island over to Demarcation Point, northeast 20 to 25 knots. And for tonight, again, all the smoke with the dense smoke advisories here for the Seward Peninsula up across the northwest valleys and back into the western central interior areas. Otherwise, less smoke, but still quite a mild evening coming up for the eastern interior. So those gusty winds through the Copper River Basin. Rain spreads into south central Alaska and extends northwestward to the Seward Peninsula. And then for tomorrow, that front dissipates with some scattered thunderstorm activity over the interior and the Brooks Range. Clouds on the increase over the southeast coast, but staying dry. And then some scattered showers around with some clearing around as well for the southwest interior. And then for Wednesday, a weak low over the central interior for scattered showers and partly cloudy skies.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.